In this video, I'm gonna give you guys 7 things no one told me about Beijing, China before visiting. And let me say that this has been an experience. It has been, like I said in another video, a culture shock. Traveling around from country to country, sometimes you're not really surprised anymore. I mean, yeah, there are some differences, but for the most part, you're like, it's similar. But coming here, yeah, I've been, it's been a whirlwind. But without further ado, let's just go ahead and get to the points. Now, let me point out that Beijing is a very popular tourist city, and for good reason. There are many attractions, sites, and places to visit. Not only that, there's a lot of history here. And because of this, there are many local tourists that come from other parts of the country. And so it took me a while to figure this out, but I think the majority of the crazy, extreme stares came from the local tourists that are maybe from the smaller cities, more inland, or that weren't from Beijing. I started to see this maybe a couple of days into the trip, because the ones that gave me the most attention, I noticed some of them, they were in groups, looking at the architecture, the buildings. They just came across as if they were new to the city. Plus, I was staying in a tourist area that consisted mainly of local tourists, because I believe the foreign tourists were they were in the northern part. The craziest experience I had with this so far was when I went to the Great Wall. It looked like there were field trips of maybe middle high school students, and there was one group that all wanted to take a picture. So there was about 30 of them in line, all just taking selfies with me. Even the field trip leader, or maybe it was the teacher, was recording the whole time. So that definitely was one of the craziest experiences I had here so far. And lastly, on this point, let me say that I believe it's more of a foreigner thing, because I've heard other tourists from other countries, they've had similar experiences. One thing that you'll see a lot, or I notice a lot, is, some people trying to sneak pictures out on the streets. And it's like, I see you, I know what you're doing, which I don't mind it. Usually when they try to do that, I try to strike a pose or turn my body so they get my good side, suck the gut in so they don't see the stomach, lift my head up like I'm looking out into the horizon. Stuff like that. So it doesn't bother me, but it's just something that's very interesting and a culture shock. Moving along, we have the layout of the city. Before I visit a place, I normally don't watch any videos about it. I just do the basic research: where to stay, best company to go to for a SIM card, exchange rates, stuff like that. So before coming here, I had no idea what the city looked like, what the streets, neighborhoods, or buildings look like. In my mind, I pictured, okay, this is a big city, so it's probably gonna be overcrowded, people everywhere, stray dogs all over the streets, trash, super loud from traffic, and people honking in their cars because they're in a rush, potholes all over the streets. And quite frankly, I was like, maybe it's not that modern. Maybe it has a few modern spots, 1 or 2 streets, and that's it. But when I arrived to the airport here, took the train to the city center, and then walked out of the subway onto the Beijing streets, I was pleasantly surprised. It was roughly around maybe 5:30, 6 p.m.-ish. So this is peak hour. People are getting off work, students getting out of class. And again, when I walked out onto the streets, man, they were clean. It was relatively quiet, not a lot of people yelling on the streets and honking. The air pollution, at least this time of year, was fine. The skies were relatively clear. People were riding their bikes through the streets. I mean, it was completely different than what I expected. Not only that, I mainly stayed in the historic center, so it has more of a traditional feel, the narrow alleyways, the temples and monuments. But then once you get outside of this area, it's pretty modern and built up. I mean, it's way different than what I had in my mind. And this is going to lead me to my next few points. One being about the safety of the city. Now, before visiting, when I told some friends and family members that, hey, I plan to go to China, one of the questions they asked me was, is it safe there? In Beijing, the only thing I was thinking was, okay, this is East Asia. And from what I understand, this region is relatively safe. You really don't hear about no-go countries in East Asia. If I was asked that same question today, I think I can safely say, no pun intended, that Beijing City is pretty safe. And I remember the first week I was here, my guide even told me, because I was asking him, hey, is it okay to go to the outskirts of the city if I want to see more of the local vibe, get more of a local feel? He said, look, you'll be just fine. Any time of day, late at night, the city is safe, don't worry. There was one time when I had to walk home. It was like a 1 hour and 40-minute walk after midnight. And at the time, the subway had stopped running. Didi, their version of Uber, I wasn't able to get it to work at the time. I wasn't able to use the bikes here because the bike app's all in Chinese, so I didn't understand what was going on. And then I didn't want to use a taxi. And so over an hour and a half, I walked home after midnight. I felt just fine. There were other people out walking. There were even women out on bikes. I'm guessing they were going back home, but this is after midnight and they're out at dark just riding a bike on the street. Not only that, they have what appears to be security that rides their bikes late at night, which tells me that this place is relatively safe. This leads me to my next point, and that is about the cameras in the city. I have to say that from all the cities I've been to, Beijing is the one where I noticed the most cameras. And it didn't hit me until about 1 week in, because in the beginning when I first got here, I'm traveling, I'm seeing the sights, the monuments. Every day I walk out into the streets, it's something new. But all the cameras didn't hit me until one day I was on the street looking for the name. And so I looked up and all I saw were 4 cameras looking straight back at me. And I'm pretty sure maybe each one has a different task because I thought that was overkill. 4 cameras right there. And then as I kept walking, I really noticed that, wow, camera after camera after camera. And so I'm pretty sure that's one of the reasons why this city, and I'm sure other cities in this country, are very safe, because if you try to act up, they're going to find you. And lastly, on this subject, I kind of touched on it already, is the fact of how clean Beijing is. Now, keep in mind, I didn't go everywhere in the city. So there might be some parts that maybe look way more run down with trash all over the streets. But when I get to a place, I do explore both on and off camera. So I've seen a fair amount of the city. Again, not the entirety. And so far, I haven't really found any super trashy, just dirty pigsty area. And for a city with over 20 million in the metro area, I found it relatively clean. Moving along, we only have 2 more on the list. The first of these 2 is something that I definitely say it's a cultural difference, something I'm not really used to, and that is the spitting. You know, when you wake up in the morning and you have some mucus in your throat and you're trying to get it out, so you're like, it seems like it's acceptable anywhere at any time. One time I was in a restaurant eating and there were some people in there sort of, I guess, getting stuff out of their throat, and you know, like, even when I was in the metro, there was a elderly lady who was walking up the stairs and she was doing the whole gargling sound, and I think she like spit in the metro. Not saying that everyone's like her. That's just one anecdote, but that's one thing I noticed. And I'm bringing this to your attention because you may be from a culture where if someone spits near you, that's offensive, that's rude. It may be a sign that they're spitting at you, like, hey, this is what I think about you. But here, I don't really think that's the case because, again, it happens everywhere. And last but not least, let me go ahead and say that, and I might be a prisoner of the moment, maybe because this trip is fresh on my mind, but Beijing is definitely one of the top tour cities I've been to. Now, keyword tourist, because I can't really speak on living in Beijing. Judging from other people, they say, oh, Shanghai is the city you want to live in. But when it comes to tourism, Beijing to me is top notch when it comes to the attractions. I mean, you got the Great Wall, Forbidden City, the hutongs, which are the narrow alleyways. The nightlife that was here, I liked it. The vibe was very interesting. It was right near a lake. And so it kind of had that historical, more traditional Chinese feel to it. And that's one of the reasons why I came here, is because of the history. So I definitely want to come and visit and see it for myself. So that's the last point. Beijing, China would definitely be a tourist city I would recommend, especially when it comes to the history and the culture and just sort of being out of your comfort zone. But all in all, I'm going to end the video right here. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. And I'm going to catch you guys at the next video. Deuces.